Hello.
I say you're up and about, ready to get back to work.
Well, I'm on the up and about, but not sure about the work part.
You know about the voting. It's anybody but me.
I'm aware today's the voting day.
See, who do we want to elect that maybe isn't here?
That's the way it's supposed to be done, right?
Last time I looked. I think Peter looks like a likely candidate.
Hey, Mike, since we didn't have MacNet this morning, maybe you could just say something to like that you're going to open it up for everybody.
Open what, Carl?
Since we didn't have MacNet.
If everybody will kind of find their way to a chair, and that goes for you guys on Facebook and Zoom and Twitter and whatever else too. Yeah, sit down, Lee. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the November meeting of the South Canadian Amateur Radio Society. If you're here for anything else, you're in the wrong place. Let's very quickly go around the room and introduce ourselves. First of all, do we have any guests here this morning? Guests, newbies? Okay, well, and we have some faces we haven't seen in a while. We're glad you're back. Glad you're in good health and back with us. So let's start and go around the room. We're going to start up here in the corner with Klein.
Mark Klein, N5HZR, Norman, America.
Who gave him a mic?
Mark Clayton. Mark Clayton, N5AZQ.
Banjo KA5HFE.
Larry W5LHG.
Denny WA6DUKD. Davey KD5DTD.
Ken KD5UGO. Bill.
Ken KA5HFE.
David KI5QMF.
Matt K5HFE.
Bing, November India 5 Golf.
Hey, sit there.
Ken K8WGE. Rodney KF5MZA. Bill 85F.
Mike KD5ASN. Aubrey KF5DKA.
Let's go to the wall.
KK5RL. And 85DB.
Jim AG42.
John Kilo Delta 5 Uniform Golf Yankees.
Rodney Snowdall 5 Sierra Tango.
South 85 and 50.
Hey, it's just AAA, Tom.
N5 Kim, this is Grace.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, Grace.
And it looks like on Zoom, we've got Lee and Jason and Carl. This is kind of like a little deal we used to do it when I was a kid. They had a kids show in the afternoon called Romper Room. And anyway, I see Mike and I see Steve and Glenn.
That
Ed.
makes you Miss Susan.
Yeah, okay. And Peter and Lucky and Mike and Al. And I don't know, there's probably more up there that I can't see. And do we have anybody on Facebook, Mark? Or not Facebook, whatever the other one is, YouTube. Cool, there's Chad too. All right, so the first order of business today is not the program. Oh, by the way, I'm Galen, WX5MOR. First order of business is to elect officers for next year for the club. Those positions this morning are Vice President. And if you are not aware, our Vice President serves for a year and then automatically becomes President for a year. So our current Vice President, Wayne, will become your President for next year. We also will be electing a Secretary and a Treasurer. Is that all? Sorry, I was up late this morning. So let's start out for the office of Vice President, which becomes President-elect. Do we have any nominations for people or anybody that wants to nominate yourself? Raise your hand, speak up. Who wants to be the Vice President? Okay, we have, okay, Mark Clayton, N5KUK. Anybody else? Anyone else interested in becoming your club's vice president or you're then in a year of the president? Are you nominating somebody here next? Denny declines. Okay. All right. Do we have, are there anybody else interested in becoming our vice president? If not, I will accept a motion to elect Mark by acclamation. Okay, I have a second, and I heard a second. Did anybody make the motion?
I'll make a motion.
You make them. Okay, and we already have seconds and thirds. All right. All those in favor of Mark being our vice president, president-elect, raise your hand, please. That looks like, and I see lots of hands on Zoom as well. Very good. Mark Clayton, congratulations, condolences. Which brings us to secretary, because our secretary is not here this morning. He's running late. Unfortunately, he had to go get a rapid test for to be able to be in an event or something that he's got going tonight. So do we have anybody interested in being secretary? I know, unless you were going to do something different that I don't know about. Okay. Anybody interested in being secretary? Secretary? Our current secretary, Chris, has already stated that he would be willing to serve another term if you are so willing. But we obviously want to give everybody the opportunity. Anybody that would like to be the secretary? One more time. Anybody wants to be secretary? I'll accept a motion from the floor to elect Chris Pape. Okay, and I see there's a second back here. All those in favor of having Chris retained as another year, please raise your hand. And we're also looking at Zoom. We see you guys too. Very good. Chris will stay as our secretary. Our final office that we need to vote on this morning is that of treasurer. Our current treasurer is Hank, HHQ, who has indicated for quite some time that he is not wanting to continue. He has served as how many years? 2.5 years. He served as the club treasurer, and he believes it's time for someone else to pick that up. So do we have anybody interested in being our treasurer? I see Larry Goodwin up front, W5LHG, not to be confused with the other person that has those similars. Do we have anyone else that might be interested in being the club treasurer? Anyway, yeah, the pup. Very good. Grace, is that right? Yeah, you know your name, don't you? All right. Anybody else interested in being the club treasurer for next year? Nothing on Zoom. Thank you.
I nominate Larry by acclamation.
Thank you, Lee. Do we have a second? Okay, several seconds. All those in favor of Larry Goodwin? Very good. Raise your hand. Congratulations, condolences. All right. Well, at this point,
make a motion?
We will.
Can I make a motion, Galen?
Go ahead, Peter.
I move that we thank Hank for his years of service as treasurer. To
Very
be
good.
celebrated by a round of applause.
Woo!
Oh.
I was applauding, Hank. I just didn't want to whack the microphone. How's that? All right. At this time, we'll suspend the business meeting and have our program, which who's starting? We have several presenters this morning. Who's starting? I hear the railroad coming in favor of Phil. The program this morning, I believe, is on railroad communications. And this time I'm going to give the mic to Phil. You tell me what's easy for you. Now the camera guy says go up front.
Camera guy said I have to go up front.
I can push it if you want.
I just need to go over the cord or move the cord.
Here, stand up. Camera.
There we go, underpass.
That'll work.
Okay, I'll tell you, I reduced mine to 99 slides. So to make it short for you guys, is this working? Keep it up. Is that about right?
I've done this since prom. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, it can come with a flower. All right. Well, my segment is railroad communication. This is just a beginning slide. For what it's worth, this is an engine built by General Motors Electromotive Division for BNSF. It's called an SD70 ACE. It's got a 4,400 horsepower intercooled turbocharged 12-cylinder V-twin engine in it with a 3.4 megawatt generator. And the total combined weight without fuel is 420,000 pounds. Okay, slide.
I agree with Ken. That has to be a model because it's too clean to be a real one.
Yeah, it looks like the rail line that comes through Norman is owned and operated by Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, also called BNSF. For a long time, they published a document. I'm going to take you straight to this timetable. The timetable told the railroaders everything you need to know about the rail line except time. trains don't run on time anymore. They're dispatched. We used to get this off the internet, but with terrorism and security and all those concerns, they don't publish that anymore. This is an old one that I got from 2008. Okay, slide. I want to take you right to the timetable. We're part of what BNSF calls the Texas Division, which is mostly Texas, Oklahoma, and southern Kansas. Within our division, the rail line that runs through Norman is the Red Rock subdivision, and you'll hear BNSF refer to the Red Rock subdivision. It goes from Arkansas City, Kansas to Gainesville, Texas. They do have a couple of other subdivisions. The Creek subdivision and the Medill subdivision go down through Tulsa, Ada, Medill, and on down through Sherman, Texas. Okay, slide. Within the BNSF timetable, there's a lot of information in that timetable. They give a list of all of the mainline stations, all the way from Arkansas City to Gainesville, Texas. I'll just zoom in on a couple of these. Next slide. Through Norman, there's the Norman station. They go by mile posts, and they put mile markers up and down the rail line. Norman is at milepost 401.8. We have a siding out here that goes between Rock Creek Road and a little bit south of Robinson. Our siding is 6.8 feet. You can see the siding down at Noble a little bit longer, 9,075 feet. Slide.
Gee, thanks for getting the orders in our county.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I missed that one. The Moore siding, 8,000 feet up there.
And runs from just south of 12th Street to just south of 19th Street.
That's right.
And frequently blocks Main Street and 4th Street.
Moore actually has more sidings. They have a main track 1 and a main track 2 and sidings. And you'll hear the trains talking about being on main 1 or main 2. Okay. The rail line that we have is a very good rail line. It's welded Class 5 rail track. So they authorize 79 miles per hour for passenger and 55 for freight. And that's out in open territory. And then in restricted areas, they have a whole list of speed limits between these mileposts that the engineers have to know. And they have speed limits just like we do on the highway. And that's some of the things that sometimes get the trains in trouble. You've heard stories about how an Amtrak train overspeeded the speed limit through some location, and it crashed and killed a bunch of people. Okay, slide. What you're here for, what you're interested in, the voice communication on the railroad is narrowband FM voice, operates in the 160 to 161 megahertz frequency range. It's divided up by channels. The channel that you'll hear coming through Norman and Moore, channel 30, and then from Wayne to Gainesville, channel 85. The call sign of the train is the engine number of the lead engine on the train. The call sign of the dispatcher for our area is DS21. And you'll hear them call DS21 to 4, 5, 6, 7 north or whatever. The voice communication is half duplex, or what you guys call simplex. There's no repeaters, nothing elaborate about it. It's straight voice communication. And 99% of the communication that you'll hear is trains talking to the dispatcher. The dispatcher acts like an air traffic controller. His job is to ensure safe train separation. And you'll hear the trains coming through town talking to the dispatcher. Next slide. These are the frequencies that I have programmed in my radio. If you look up the railroad frequencies on radio reference, you'll see hundreds of frequencies, a lot of them. Honestly, 99% of the communication through Norman happens on this channel 30, which is 160.560. When I loaded these in, I thought, oh boy, I can hear the BNSF police. But if the BNSF Railroad Police are out here on the track, you can bet that they're going to be on the dispatch frequency talking to the dispatcher. Nobody moves on that track without talking to the dispatcher. If you go south to Chickasha, there's their dispatch frequency. And down around Ada, you'll see a couple of other frequencies they use in that Medill and Creek subdivision. If you have your radio on a good base station antenna, sometimes you'll hear the Union Pacific dispatcher on 160.47. That radio is over at El Reno, and that's subdivision they have that goes from Enid through El Reno to Chickasha to Lawton. And I hear them, of course, I hear them on the BNSF frequency, and I hear them on the Union Pacific frequency. The other two frequencies, long time ago, the railroad decided to get rid of the cabooses, and they put a flashing red light on the end of the train that they call the flashing red end device. A lot of brakemen used to ride in the cabooses, and they would turn the wheels and set the brakes and stop the train. They all got laid off. So they have a different name for that F. You really can't, this is digital. The engine communicates with the Fred, and the Fred responds back to the engine. And it tells the engineer that the light's running, the back of the train's moving. It gives it brake pipe pressure. And you'll hear the digital chirp of the signal going engine to Fred and Fred to engine. You really can't make anything out of that. But that's only a couple of watts. And if you hear that Fred telemetry, you know the train's not too far away. Oh, I forgot one thing. The railroad, the radios in the trains are nominal 40 watt. They're not high power radio, narrowband FM, and they do have a touch tone pad on that radio, and the railroad has a phone patch on this 560 frequency, just like we have on our repeater. And occasionally you'll hear the train punch in a phone number and then make a phone call. And just like phone patch, you hear both sides of the conversation going on.
Bill, what kind of, what brand of radios do
They, Motorola, General Electric, Harris, other brands, if they'll bid those out. But railroad radios are spec'd out to all be the same. The radio and the railroad has the big cannon plug, the military style cannon plug. It doesn't matter what brand they buy, they can shove it in that slot, connect it up, and it'll work. If you want my list, you're welcome to give me an email and I'll shoot you back that list on email. Next slide. Okay, we're gonna see if I can do this. The railroad does have automatic detectors out on the railroad that count the axles and report on that 160.56 frequency. It tells the number of axles. It looks for defects like dragging equipment, and it gives the milepost number. So when you hear that recording come over, you can tell that the train has crossed that milepost. Let's see if I can do this.
No defects. Repeat, no defects. Total axle 606 out.
And that's all it says. And the train will go through town and you'll hear the detector. 395.5 is up north of Indian Hill Road on 34th Street. And 404.2 is down on Constitution Avenue on the south end of Norman. And then there's another detector that we can't hear. It's a 377.7 that's north of Moore. So generally they put the detectors between the towns that have sightings. So it reports to the dispatcher that that train's moving through that area. Okay. The rest of this is all slides. Here's a typical crossing warning device. This one's down on Acres Street. I actually called in a crossing warning malfunction. I called the 1-800 number for BNSF and I talked to the guy and I told him he had a crossing warning malfunction. Next slide. What he wanted to know was what's printed there. He wanted to know where it is, Acre Street. He wanted to know the milepost number for 1.37, and he wanted the DOT number. So if you call in a problem to the railroad or something about the railroad, it's helpful for them if you can know the milepost number where you're calling in. And you see that one, that control building has endured some of our hailstorms. Okay, next slide. I threw this one in. There's another picture. You get a peek inside that control building and you can see all the wiring that goes into it. The bicycle belonged to the man that was struck and killed and crushed to death by that train. When the rule is when the train's coming along, stay away from the tracks. So those trains are huge. They're moving faster and they're closer than what they look like when you're just standing there. So it's important to stay away from the tracks. That's a news article. They were investigating that accident. Okay. There's a, back up one. I cut that from the news article. When those trains are moving through a fully loaded 100-car train, moving 50 miles an hour, takes almost a mile to get stopped on emergency stop. That particular train blocked Acres intersection for over 2 hours while they investigated it. And we moan and bitch because trains block the intersections, but then these idiots get out and they get struck by the train. As you know, in 2017, the city of Norman did a project to upgrade their crossings and to improve the crossing to make it more difficult for idiots to drive out in front of the train. That's a great thing. If it was my choice, every city would do those upgrades and the train would blow the horn anyway. The train engines don't have to blow the horns, but they are allowed to. And if they see an obstruction on the track, they will definitely blow the horn. And the dispatcher sends out a message to all of the engineers coming through Norman on game day to use liberal use of the horn, because you got so many idiots down there walking across the tracks, going to and from the game, they'll blow the horns. 12 fatal pedestrian collisions in 2015 and 16. When the train's coming along, stay away from the tracks. Next slide.
Do they also issue a slow order on game days?
Yes. Sometimes they'll do a speed restriction, 25 miles an hour through Norman on game day. Here's a train going along on the side track. They still use the red, yellow, and green semaphore signals. Ken's going to tell us all about signals later, right? Next slide. There's a train going through. Sometimes the train will have engines on the back pushing the train along, and these engines are remote controlled over a radio link from the front engine to the back engine. Next slide. There's something you don't see every day. There's a load of M1 Abrams tanks going south, and there's a whole train full of those things going south. Next slide. My favorite cars are the tank cars, because it's interesting to me to see the strange and exotic and horrific chemicals that those trains sometimes carry.
Phil, I have a question.
Yes.
How many trains go through Moore and Norman at any given time that's got hazardous chemicals in those tank cars?
About half of them. And we have approximately one train every 45 minutes, about 36 trains a day coming through Norman. And a lot of the trains there'll be a long train with tank cars on it. If
a vast majority of the hazardous products that are on those are hydrocarbons of one sort or another, or alcohols. The amount of exotic stuff, or you see a little bit of chlorine, but beyond that, according to a year study that we did that was updated about a year ago now, other than the hydrocarbons and the alcohols, there really wasn't much in the way of other hazardous stuff.
really, really bad actor materials, yeah.
We've got we get a study about once a year. We request for particular time period, you know, how many movements were there through? How many of them were residue cars versus full cars? And what were the products that were on there? So I've got that study. If anybody's interested, I'll be happy to have you come out and we'll have a cup of coffee and look at it.
I have a question. Did you take care not to put two of those cars next to each other that in a crash could?
They're careful about how they arrange the cars. A tank train will usually have an empty, unused car at the head end and at the back end so that a tank car is not right up against the engine. And every once in a while, I'll see a intermodal train come through. It's not a tank train. But right in the middle of that train, they'll have a tank car that's one of these crash resistant tanks with a steel frame around it, nestled in the middle of that train. And you got to figure they're carrying something pretty bad.
Bill, the other day I was right there at the railroad crossing there by the post office there in Noble. And one come by with all the shipping containers.
Yeah.
There was 3 or 4 of them deals.
Of those tank cars with the armored tank car going through there. If they're carrying some kind of hazmat, they'll have the red triangular placard on the car, just like these over here. And it'll have a number on it that tells what kind of chemical they're hauling. And you can download that onto your cell phone, the decoder, and it'll tell you what kind of chemical is in there. Next slide.
And if you haven't updated that, the latest version, it comes out every 4 years, and the latest version was released here 6 months ago or so. So if you don't have the 2020 version.
Yeah, download a new one.
There's also a hard copy of it right over here on the other side of the podium. So if you want to look at what 1301 is, the book right here will tell you.
This car is carrying vinyl acetate. And this car, this 1265, is carrying pentane, which is a component of gasoline. It's an alcohol component of gasoline. These placards are important because if the firemen are out fighting a fire relating to a tank car, they need to know what kind of chemical is in that car or what kind of fire they need to fight. So the placards are real important to the firefighters and rescuers. Okay, next slide. There's a typical intermodal train. We have more and more of those, a lot of those now going through. And these are truck trailers. Some of them will have truck wheels, some of them are just Connex boxes. But they go through, and there'll be over 100 trailers on these intermodal trains. Next slide. And every once in a while, you see this guy going down the track. They tell me that the maintenance away folks will travel the entire track at least once a week and look for problems and defects and such to ensure that the track is clear. And I believe that's it. That's all. Questions?
Hey, Phil. Phil, it's Lee on the.
I'm first. A typical defect is dragging equipment that has damaged a cross tie, or it's not unusual to have a broken rail. And you'll see the maintenance away guy go through, and he'll find the rail. They've got equipment that can detect cracks in the steel rail, and then they'll come through with a repair crew and they'll repair that. That's typical. They have a lot of crossing warning devices that are old, and sometimes they don't come down when they should, or sometimes some idiot will throw a steel bar across the track and make the crossing warning come down when it shouldn't, and they have to go out and find that, clear that problem. Okay, question on the line.
Phil, I was going to say, this is Lee. And when I was a paramedic, I had 3 different instances where I had to get pedestrians or other people out from under trains. And people always wonder why a train has to be in a location for so long when an accident happens. And it's because there's a state law that says that we have to collect all humanly remains. I spent 5 hours under one train and put a little 16-year-old boy into 15 doggy bags. So he missed you out.
Whatever the train rolls over, it'll cut. But yeah, it's pedestrian accidents are gruesome. Yes, sir. The railroad owns all the track, the grade crossing, and they have a right of way plus or minus 100 feet either side of the track that's theirs. And they make it very clear, stay off their right of way, and they can arrest you and put you in jail if you're out there messing around on their right of way. But yeah, they're responsible for that. I don't know, I suppose the city is responsible for the roadway leading up to the edge of the right of way, and then the railroad owns from the right of way on in. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much the city's right up to the area of the track.
The edge of the track, yeah, not the track, not the right way itself.
Yeah, this crossing right here, Rock Creek Road, has been a mess for years. Good luck with that. The right lane going east.
I've got a curious question. How far back should vehicles set from the actual crossing guards when trains are coming down the track? 15 to 50 feet. From where the crossing guards come down, how far back should the front of the first car sitting there waiting, should it be from that crossing guard?
I've never heard any regulation, but I can tell you that if you're outside of that crossing guard, you're safe. There's not going to be anything about the train that will hang over outside of that crossing guard rail.
Other than a piece of bending steel that broke loose on a car and flipping around.
And it's flipping around, and the detector's supposed to detect that, but not always. And there's one horror story about some man and his son that went out and they were putting coins on the track. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but because the rails would smash them, and they were standing a little bit too close, and one of these pieces of steel hanging off hit the man, killed him in front of his son. Gruesome deal. Questions?
School buses are regulated to 15 to 50 feet.
15 to 50 feet. I know school buses and tankers, gasoline tankers, and all that, they have to stop. Yes, sir.
I have a pretty quick question. The opening slide, you had a locomotive. I think you said it was rated 2,400 horsepower.
4,400 horsepower.
Because I did a quick calculation of the 4.25 megawatt, that comes up to about 57 horsepower.
Yeah. 4,400 horsepower. The old ones were actually 2-stroke diesels. The newer ones are 4-stroke diesels. And they've reduced from 16 to 12 cylinders to try to get more economy in that engine. But yeah, 3,400 kilowatt out of that. And that engine will have 6 electric drive motors, one on each axle.
I just got asked, how much fuel do they carry? I think you said something.
Each one of those tanks is 5,000 gallons. And the ad that they had on TV is, oh, the ad they had on TV is not really that far off. They claim that they could carry a ton of freight, 500 miles on 1 gallon of fuel. And that engine will pull, each one of those cars is anything up to 200,000 pounds, like 100 tons per car, 100-ton train, 10,000 tons total. And they'll pull that thing down to Texas on one load of fuel.
It's a big charge.
Yeah, big fuel bill. I wouldn't want it on my card. Yeah, what else? Yep. The engine is a diesel engine. It drives an electric generator. The older ones were DC generators with resistive control and DC traction motors. The newer ones are 3-phase AC generators, and they have a triac electronic control similar to our switch mode power supplies that control the AC traction motors. This allows the engine to run at a fairly constant speed, not that fast, anywhere from 200 to 1200 RPM. And it runs at a constant speed. And I don't know why they do it, but these gigantic earth moving equipment do the same thing. They're diesel electric. And
if you see one on fire, don't put water on it.
yeah, don't put water on it. That's why the firemen want to know what's in those tanks, so they'll know what to fight it with. There's some things you don't want to put water on.
Don't want water on the generator.
No, no. Okay, that's all for me. I'll turn it over to the next guy.
Thank you, Phil.
I'm going to be moving around. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There was a question during Phil's presentation about the number of trains through Norman, and it has changed recently. As trains have gotten longer, there don't have to be as many of them. But for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been counting them every day. And right now we're averaging 24, 25 trains per day through Norman. It has come down a lot. Even if you ask the railroad how many trains, they'll say 36. That's just their answer, but they don't actually look at it. But I've counted all of them for the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't get much sleep. We're going to talk a little bit here, and I did have about 2 hours worth of discussion, but I don't have that many slides, and you'd have to just sit there and watch me for 2 hours. And I decided we'll take things easy. Besides, there's a football game that starts at 11. So we're going to talk a little bit about railroad signaling and control, and why are signals needed? Well, actually, they're not, unless you've got more than one train. If you've got 2 trains, then you need to coordinate the movements between them. And early on, the trains were dispatched just by word of mouth, and they used a system called token passing. You could only get into this block of track if your train had the token. Nobody else had the token. That worked kind of well, but as trains got longer, more frequent, carrying more freight, and the locations where they needed to go became more common. That didn't work out well. So the thing that really sped up the signaling along the tracks was the electric telegraph. Now you could have the dispatcher talking to train order clerks up and down the line. Train order clerk, as Phil was talking, the train order clerk would copy down the train orders from the dispatcher, give them to the locomotive engineers and tell them, you've got to stop at this siding, you have to wait for that train, and they could coordinate that. And if they didn't have to stop, why stop? So they put signals up. The signals were controlled by people. There were various types of them. Back east, they had a lot called Banjo Signals, which was kind of in the shape of a banjo. There were also poles like a flagpole with balls that they could raise up and down. And you'll hear even today, when they're ready to move a train, they'll say highball Norman. And that means that they can go pass on through there because they don't have to stop. The early signals were fine, but they required humans to operate them. And as things developed with the telegraph, they knew they could communicate up and down the line. The electric signals became common, but these were still manually operated for the most part by the local train order clerks in the stations. One of the things that they needed to do was between stations, also control trains there. Would you go next slide, please? So we have, this is Norman back in the late 70s, what were always called the telegraph lines. And there were probably some telegraph circuits in there, but mostly the lines along the track were carrying coded messages or DC relay messages between signals. Next slide. What we have here is a basic section of track. The battery would be feeding one end of it, and there's insulated gaps in the section of track. That section of track would be maybe 3 miles long, and it's not shown here, but there would be a ballast resistor in series with that battery to protect the battery. Now, as the current went down the track, it would come to a relay at the other end of the track. So battery voltage and current passing down the track to the relay coil would energize this sensitive relay. And when the relay is energized, then it can light the light, showing that there is no train on that track and everything is clear to go. Once a train gets on the track, steel wheels on the steel rails will short out the power supply, the relay drops out and it turns red. Well, that would protect the track. You'd also have to have a light at this end of the gap to protect that section of track. So you've got to have those lines along the track, which will be signaling the relay signal back and forth. But you can't have a train come up and immediately stop because they see this signal. So in that section of track, you also have to have signals 3 miles down this way, which are advanced signals to warn the train that there is going to be a stop signal up ahead, be ready to stop at the next signal. And the same down that way. That's why there are so many wires on those poles that you saw along the rail. This system can operate automatically, and that is what it's called. This section of track would be a block of track. And so we're talking about automatic, automatic block signals, which would automatically control that section of track. And these are independent of the dispatcher, independent of the train order operators. They would just operate automatically and would stop trains from getting caught in this section of track. There would be this signal pole at each end of that. If that signal pole has a number plate on it, and you can see this as an example, just south of Brook Street in Norman, there's a signal pole there. It's got the number plate on it that gives the approximate mile pole number. If it's got a number plate on it, it's called a permissive signal, which means that a train has to come up there and stop. But if they can see there's no restriction up ahead, if they don't have any restriction noted, they can proceed at a speed which is half the speed, or at a speed which would allow them to stop in half the distance that they can see. And that is the rule until they can see another signal, which gives them a green indication. There's another thing which, if you listen on the frequencies that Phil gave you, the 160.560, you'll hear Amtrak come into Norman every morning, and they will stop at the depot. The next signal down the line is Brook Street, but there's a rule in the rule book that says that if you stop or slow down below 10 miles per hour after you have passed a green signal, then you have to proceed at restricted speed until you see a good signal, a green signal. And so when Amtrak stops at the Norman Depot, the conductor will call, platform is clear, we're ready to go, delayed in the block. And the delayed in the block signal means that they stopped after seeing a green signal. They can't see the Brook Street signal because that's approach lit until they start moving. And then the engineer will call clear at 402 dot whatever it is, the milepost number, and then they can proceed at normal speed. But that is some of the way the signals interact. And all of my discussion today will be strictly on our rail line through here, because other railroads, especially back east, they have different rules. The railroads have different ways they handle these things and different signal patterns. But this pertains to BNSF. Next slide, please. The next stage in this was for the dispatchers to be able to control signals along the line, mainly the signals which are at each end of a siding. This is a CTC board, which is centralized traffic control. The dispatcher, using the switches in here, can control the track switches up and down the line. And he's got a display board up at the top there, which has indicator lights that allows him to see what the status is in each section of track. If there's a train in a section of track, it would give an indication there. If a switch is thrown, he'll see indications on his indicators here, which will tell him how the switches are thrown. Well, this all used DC relay logic, and at the field locations, there were extensive relay logic in there, which it must have driven the signal engineers crazy trying to build this logic, which would protect everything, because they have to design it so that there cannot be an indication which would put a train at risk. In order to get the information from this control console out to the field, this was in the days before microelectronics and so forth, they were using pulse code on those telephone lines or control lines. And the telephone companies had by this time developed pulse relays, step relays, and things like that. They knew how to send pulse codes down the lines, but that was how this all went. And that wasn't fail-safe. That was prone to occasional errors. So if the dispatcher threw a switch here that he wanted a signal to change or a switch to change out in the field, his indication wouldn't show that it changed until out in the field it received that, determined that it could do that without putting a train at risk, and it would have to send a pulse code message back to the console, which would indicate here that it had actually taken place. So until he got the message back, he wouldn't know if the signal had changed, the switch had moved, or whatever in the field. I'm sorry? 30 seconds maybe. But because the pulses went like the pulses on a telephone, on your old telephone dial. But you had to have relay logic, which would decode the pulses because they used one pair of wires to control a number of things. So each location had to decode its own location code and then decode what the indication was supposed to be. So it did take time to move this back and forth, but 30 seconds maybe, not a long time. Next slide, please. As things came along, we have microelectronics now, computer control. This on a computer display takes the place of the display board that was at the top of that console that had the little light bulbs. And this is the type of display the dispatcher would see. This is taken right off of our rail line here. We've got Norman up there. Track there is white, so there is nothing lined through. Down here, there's a train which is lined in from Britain through the Nowers switch. If there was a train on the line, there's a train sitting right here on the siding at Flynn. Up there, train, the dispatcher has it lined through at Paoli. This is a display from the ATCS monitor system. Now, ATCS is Advanced Train Control System. ATCS is not a signal system, but it is a set of protocols which was designed by the AAR, the Association of American Railroads, for data communication. It defines the way that the call letter or the identification letters for a location are. It defines the type of signals that are indicated in here, defines all of that. So ATCS is used as the protocol to move the data from the dispatcher out to the field and respond from the field back to the dispatcher telling them what would happen. Now, these messages are much longer than you could send on pulse code. The pulse code went on wireline code line, which is what those wires all along the rail are called, the code line system. This is sent on radio code line, RCL, and with the electronics, you can send a message with a lot of information in it, much faster. This is sent, I think, at 4,800 baud, so that's done quickly. The ATCS system that is in place here along our line operates at a frequency of 897.8875 megahertz. That is the frequency that each one of these signal locations uses to send their information back to the dispatcher. The dispatcher's console sends the information. The dispatchers for this line are in Fort Worth. They microwave that to a central site, which here is up around Crossroads Mall. That is a high tower with a transmitter that can reach quite a distance. It transmits on 936.8875, and each one of these sites has a receiver. Kind of like the code line, the wireline code line, the dispatcher's console will send out an order for a switch to be thrown. But again, you have the vital logic within the shelter that looks up and down the line. Can I throw this switch safely without putting a train at risk? Can I throw it because there's not a train coming? You don't want to throw the switch just as a train is approaching because you could cause an accident that way. So the logic in the field examines the railroad, and it examines the command that the dispatcher sent. And if it can do that safely, then it starts to do the action, and it sends a message back to the dispatcher to tell them, yes, we've got this action taken. Next slide, please. That dispatcher's display that I just showed you was received at my house. This is the antenna system that I use, one pointed north and one pointed south, to pick up the signals from the various points along the line. Next slide. This is a duplexer, which is connected to the antennas. The duplexer separates the signal at 897 from the signal at 936, which I'm not using here. But the 897 signal then goes into a preamplifier. And next slide, down to a Motorola. I don't remember the model. Anyway, I got a couple of Motorola receivers which pick that up. The signal from the receivers then goes to a computer which does the decoding. Next slide. And the decoding is then sent to a server in Chicago. So to receive this, the operating frequency 897.8875, which is the field site frequency. Discriminator output from the receiver. You need discriminator output because you don't want any pre-emphasis, de-emphasis stuff to distort the digital waveform. Take a discriminator output from the receiver. That is fed to a USB sound card. And through years of experimentation, a lot of users have found that the best sound card for decoding this is called a Griffin iMic, which was originally intended for people who want to, for instance, transcribe your old vinyl phonograph records to digital or this sort of thing. It's a very accurate decoder and it works very well with these signals. Unfortunately, it's no longer made, but there are some other USB sound decoders that work that way. Anyway, you use the USB sound card that is fed into a program which does the actual demodulation of the signals. It does the decoding and breaks all of that down. And then that information, the raw data that is broken down, is sent to a server that's up in the Chicago area. Next slide. There is a group that supports the software that I use for that. And the ATCS monitor group is on groups.io. If you're a member of any of the groups on groups.io, then you can request membership on an ATCS monitor group. And that's where the software is, where all the group support is. There is a wiki, which gives most of the information about this. And that is a little hard to read, but ATCS wiki-beta.greatlakesnetworking.net. The wiki is a little bit old, though it has been updated in places. However, the wiki in other places refers to Yahoo groups, because before groups.io, all of this used to be on Yahoo groups before that was disbanded. And there's a number of tutorials on YouTube and written tutorials that help along with that. Next slide. And the next slide was supposed to say, where are we? Where are we and what's next? Well, in 2008, there was a Metrolink train departed the Chatsworth station in California. As the train departed the station after doing their station stop, the engineer looked down and he was texting a couple of young rail fans that he had befriended. And he passed a signal displaying a red stop indication. And after he did that, he also passed through a track switch, which was lined against him, and started rounding a long curve. And as he started rounding that curve, a Union Pacific freight train came out of a tunnel at the other end of the curve, and the two trains met with a closing speed of about 80 miles an hour. There were fatalities. And in a big populated area, the government says, oh, we're going to have to do something about this. We can't have that happening. So the government took action to make sure this never happens again. The National Transportation Safety Board has for many years been advocating a program called Positive Train Control. And Positive Train Control has a computer in each locomotive. The computer in the locomotive is hooked up to a GPS, and it is in constant communication with the wayside devices, so that if you try to pass a stop signal, it would put on the brakes in the locomotive. It's also in communication, constant communication with the dispatch center, which will tell it about slow orders, conflicting traffic or anything. The whole idea is that the computer in the train can stop the train even if the engineer doesn't take action on it. Well, this takes a lot of communication between the trains and the wayside devices and the dispatch center. And that couldn't be done on those frequencies, which are in use for ATCS. So what are we going to do about that? Another part of the story dates back to the 90s, when you'll recognize this. Frequencies in the ham band at 222 megahertz were pulled from amateur radio and given to UPS. UPS was going to put in a big network so that they could have their drivers know where they were and constantly do. Well, UPS found out that they could do it a lot cheaper by just buying bandwidth from the cellular companies. So they didn't use the frequencies. The FCC said to the railroads, we'll give you those frequencies to use for your communications. So all of the PTC, positive train control communications, are in the 220 megahertz band. That's a new system. And when they were designing the new system, they said, well, let's design it with a lot of flexibility, TCP/IP communication through there, and other capacity. So now there is capacity in that system where they can send the ATCS signals back and forth. They don't have to use those ATCS frequencies, which is based on 1980s technology. They're going to have to upgrade things anyway. So a lot of the railroads are moving to use this ITCS system in the 220 megahertz range. We can't decode it. There are encrypted portions of that, and the rest of it is sent at high speed, and it's just not decodable. So we're losing the ability to use the ATCS monitor program. BNSF up in the Chicago area has already converted a lot of lines up there. Union Pacific has converted a lot of lines. This line hasn't, through Norman, hasn't been converted yet, but also other railroad companies, CSX notably, have decided we're going to wash our hands of the whole mess. And they contracted out with a commercial communication provider. They say, at each one of these wayside locations, give us a drop with a TCP/IP address, and we will put our communications on that. You carry the communication from the field to the dispatch center and back and forth, and we will pay you this. Well, this is popular because you can fire all your communication people. You just pay the phone company to get the communication where you need it back and forth. So that communication is no longer monitorable by ATCS. I don't know if I've got any more slides up here. Obviously, I didn't get all of them on there, but that's where things are going. If you were interested in ATCS, it will be good for a while, but that's going to be going away soon. And that's all I've got. If anybody has any questions. Yeah, go ahead, Denny.
Do you do this for your pleasure?
Yes.
Or is there something else, just your?
Yeah, well, in addition to this, my day job, I am the morning train host at the Norman Amtrak Depot. And by using this, I can see when the Amtrak train is going to arrive and tell the passengers, train is just passing Rock Creek Road in Norman. You need to get your bags together and get your tickets out because they'll be here in 2 minutes. Anybody else? Okay, next.
Okay, I have been preceded by two very serious rail fans. My other bad habit, aside from ham radio, is model railroading. And I belong to the Oklahoma Model Railroad Association. And we, slide please. There's a building up on I-235 on the east side that looks a lot like that. That's a scale model built by one of our members. And we've got about 12,000 square feet of model railroad potential there. Next slide. I'm going to be as brief as I can. That's just the scene from the railroad. Next. A little bit of cloud cover there. We have lightning and thunder, but we don't have any real water. It'd be a little bit detrimental to the model, but it's a pretty cool looking scene. Next. This is another segment of where we're really under construction. There's about 4,500 square feet on the first floor and on the second floor for layouts. And the whole scheme is obviously to simulate as accurately as we can the real railroading. It's much safer though. The crash is sometimes a little spectacular, but very few real injuries. We lost 20 stack cars, intermodal cars the other day that went right to the floor. That was not fun for the owner of that train, but he was pushing a little bit too fast and clotheslined, which is why you'll have rear end power. Because if you got a lot of weight behind you and you're dragging at the head end and you're going along curve, it'll tend to pull the track, they'll pull the cars off the track. So they put a little rear end power to help that. Next, please. And just another area in the building right now. Next. And we do have a very large classification yard on that leg that we looked at earlier, and an additional staging yard. There's going to be about 13 to 17 scale miles of run, depending on the path you choose. So it's going to take, at scale speeds, 15, 20 minutes to get around a layout, or 30. Sir. Pardon? This is an HO layout. I bet a lot of us have had in the past Lionel or a Marx or one of the 3-rail trains that really got it all going. But the other layout that will be in this building is an O scale. It's a 2-rail O scale, not a Lionel, but true scale. And it's going to be set in Denver, basically. And they're well on their way there as well. Next. This is what a layout could end up looking like. This is one of our members' personal layout. And there's a lot of detail. And I can't even begin to believe how many hours he's got involved in it. Next. He just does some really gorgeous work. And he has a hard time. This individual has challenging eyesight. He has macular degeneration, and he's, in spite of that, he builds gorgeous layout. Next. Okay, virtual rail fan. We did decide as a group that sponsoring one of the virtual rail fan cameras would be good for our location. Our ultimate goal is to set up a museum. We're still in the early stages of that, but virtual rail fan, and those that are, that's probably more than a few people that know about it, but it's a mecca for a lot of rail fans. They'll go around and find these cameras, find the locations, and get out in front of the camera. But they post a warning that you're being recorded both on camera and audio both. And they must have had a few interesting conversations recorded over the years, I guess. But so it's actually staffed. We have 2 cameras situated there. Can you go to the feed? they actually put up a stationary camera and they put up a pan and zoom camera. And somebody sits out there and staffs these various sites and controls that zoom camera. Right now it's stationary, but they spend a lot of time sitting in front of their computer, panning and zooming. Secondary benefit is we can always check out 235 traffic if you're getting ready to go that way in the morning. And now this segment is between 36th Street and 50th Street North on 235, and the building that where we're situated with the cameras at like 4300 North Sewell. It's just east of the main line. And if that right of way is 100 feet, then BNSF is probably right in our lobby. But we're really close. The fence is definitely, it's close. So it's a great location for rail fans. And as a model railroader, it's just a little bit extra special for that. Okay, next, back to the slide. Okay, if you have one of these wonderful little Baofangs that you don't have anything else you want to do with, and I know a lot of us have gotten them and graduated to better radios. If you go into Chirp under the stock configuration menu under files, there is a USCA railroad channel selection. Next. And you can just upload all of the radio frequencies for railroading. One thing that you probably should do in this column is to go into duplex column and turn it off. That way you can't key up accidentally in the band. So if you're going to use it as a scanner for any scanner function, none won't do it. But if you go duplex off, then you won't accidentally key up, cause anybody any grief. And that's basically all I'm going to, well, I really have time for, I guess, but anyway, the virtual rail fan thing has brought us a lot of visitors, and it's a lot of fun. So it's something else you can look at. There are multiple memberships available for that. You can just go on YouTube and look at it as a regular viewer. You can get a YouTube membership that has no advertising, or you can get a website membership. And they reach us, they say about 11 million people per month in 200 countries. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, that's about all I have for now. And I think it's getting to be almost game time. So 73.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Ken or anything else? Let's give all three of them another one hand, please. And Ken, I can assure you that my dad in Kansas is one of the faithful viewers. He was so excited when Oklahoma City got one, I guess, just because I'm here. All right, business meeting. We're going to make it quick. We're going to kind of suspend some of the way we normally do things, but the goal will be to have a meeting, but get you out of here. Chris, is there anything particular in the minutes from last time that we need to deal with? Or of note? Okay. Hank, anything in the treasury that of particular note that's new, different, or otherwise? Sorry.
As far as expenses are concerned, we had the picnic expenses and that's about it. So insurance, but very flat month.
Okay, very good. Anybody have any questions about the treasury or the minutes? All right, we're going to move right on. Nets, we have a number of nets, 6 meter on Monday night, Aries net 2 meter on Tuesday night, the DMR net on Monday night, Gossip net on Tuesday night, 10 meter net on Wednesdays. Michelle's are still YL nets on Thursdays, Mondays. Okay, the YLs talk all the time. Okay, so you net guys and Siren net on Saturday. Sorry, Peter, almost forgot. Is there anything in particular going on any of the nets that needs to be brought up? Going, gone. Yes, Siren net at noon today. And I don't know whether you've emailed me or not, but yes, Moore's is on.
Okay.
Anything from the technical folks? Ed, everything running good? All right, everything's running good, he says. VE net, Peter, anything?
Yeah, we had one new ham at the last test session, KI5SJL. Kevin, if he's there today, congratulations. Next test is on the 2nd of December. Still no word on NFCC fee.
Very good, thank you. All right, the SCARS Christmas party will be on, I believe it's a Tuesday night, December 7th, December 7th. At
Harbor Day.
I'm sorry, Ken, did you have your hand up? Okay. December 7th at the Golden Corral, 5:30 to 8 in the back corner. We have a couple of questions for you. Number one, do you want to do a gift exchange? If we do, just a regular gift exchange? Do we want to do a dirty Santa? What is the preference of you all? Denny says regular gifts exchange. Wayne? Wayne says the same thing. Anybody on Zoom? Okay, I guess we'll plan for a regular gift exchange. The second item, oh, I'm sorry, Bill. What do you want the limit to be? 3,000. Mark's limit's 3,000. $10 is what we've done back. $10. 10 in the past. Is that what we want to do this year? Inflation. Denny says inflation. Let's make it 15. What's your thoughts? I see a few heads nodding for 15. Anybody opposed to 15? Free stuff from Harbor Freight does not count. Unless it's really good stuff. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So a couple of years ago, our esteemed president at the time, I think they'd run into a problem the year before with the staff at the Golden Corral not receiving what was a responsible tip, and that esteemed president for the next year said, all right, went club and or the treasurer and had the club pay the tip. Are we still good with doing that? Okay, hang on a minute. I'm not ready to take a motion because I have a question yet for the esteemed president that did that. Ma'am, was the amount that you had enough or did it need to be higher? The amount then was $150. Am I correct? That's what, hey, you're not the treasurer. Hush. Okay. The amount that Michelle had during her tenure as president was $150. Are we good with that? Do we want to increase it just a little bit, Hank? Okay, so the suggestion, and we'd heard this suggestion earlier too, but Hank's comment was that we don't know the number of people that will be attending. It may be down given current world circumstances.
How about a multiple of attendees?
Well, how about we authorize the tip to be up to a particular amount, and then that amount decided by the executive board
At the time.
actually at the event.
Yep, sounds good.
Kim? No, it's pay your own. No. It's when you attend, you pay for your dinner. However, Michelle, hang on a second. Let me get a mic back to you so that the Zoom folks can hear. The question was, how was the amount arrived at in rough terms?
Right. Okay. So it's 15 with the drink. So it was 10, depending on how many people.
Making it kind of a sliding scale of like 15%.
But we don't know the total. You can estimate based on how many people there. But you know what? In these times, these people have stayed and they have worked. And I don't see a
Yes.
problem with being even more generous than we have in the past.
Seconded.
Not less generous.
Seconded.
But I would be more.
I'd like to say that if the staff's gonna have to put up with us, they need more money.
There you go.
What's the average total cost that we do spend there as the group? Like, has anyone ever gotten those numbers?
It's going to be very dependent on the number of attendees.
Yeah, people
and
that actually show up.
We just absolutely don't have a good means to estimate that this year because of all of the world events going on.
How about up to 25% of the?
Michelle says 30 to 35. That was 2 years ago.
I dig it. I miss that.
2 years ago.
Yeah, 30-35%.
I think that's fine.
Of the
Authorize
number
up
of
to
people.
an
I mean, we
amount.
know
That's
what's
Kim's
spent by the number
suggestion.
of people that's there.
Okay, I think we had somebody chatting on the Zoom. Say again.
I'm sorry. There was, we know the number, or the dollars spent by the number of people that come. So yeah.
I second whoever said that we need to be extra generous. I second that.
Yeah, 35% of.
Yeah, I think that's
of
fine.
that number of whoever shows up.
It's cheap
Plus-
food. It's good. They put up with
Yeah,
us
plus
for a
a
couple
couple.
hours. It's fine.
Okay, I see lots of nodding heads, at least on Zoom, and I think I saw a few on the room too, of wanting to be generous with our servers. So at this time, does anybody wish to make a motion? And I think it probably should be something perhaps in the form of authorizing an amount up to whatever dollar figure you feel. And with the final determination being made by the
On the ground.
executive folks that are present at the time based on the number of people. Wayne? Stand by. We need to get that one on mic.
Okay, well, I'll make the motion that we authorize up to $200 to spend on the tip.
Okay, we've had a couple of seconds and thirds in the room and probably, was there anybody on Zoom too, probably? Everybody?
You're fine.
Okay, do we have any further discussion on
Be
this?
generous. Do it. It's
All right,
Christmas.
all
Be
those in
generous.
favor signify by raising your hand. The room, everybody, it looks like most everybody's up and looks like so on Zoom. So therefore, let's bid. There will not be an Elmer night that night. Correct?
What?
However, in the past, the nets have continued. There will not be an Aries net that night, I'm told. Gossip net, everybody home by that time? Makes, hey, it's up to you guys. It doesn't matter. Whatever you think. Okay, so for sure, no Aries net, no Elmer night, Golden Corral. Any other comments? See
Beat the
you
date.
there. It is 5:30 to 8. 5:30 to 8
8.
in Norman. Is it? I would say 24th and Main. Is that right?
Roughly.
It's west of there. Okay. We will make sure to address this on the club's Facebook page and in the newsletter. And if our net controllers would be so kind as to provide this information as well.
Date.
Say
What's
again,
the date?
Peter.
The date.
The date is Tuesday, December 7.
Oh, Pearl Harbor Day. Right. Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other business for the club? Have I missed? What have I missed, Phil?
Leadership this year for giving us a great year in 2021.
Year ain't over yet. All right. Any further business? I know we've abbreviated some of this afternoon or this morning. If you want to talk about something, we'll talk. Or if you want to go cheer the Sooners on. And I would say the Cowboys later tonight, but I think there's probably some dissent on that one too, right?
Nobody likes Dallas.
I don't know. Some of us Sooners might want to see the Frogs do well today. I don't know. Hank? Yes, our treasurer has reminded me, please go online, take a look at the club roster and look at your entry. First of all, if your entry is not there, that means you haven't paid dues. So get with Hank on that. But hey, meeting's not over yet. If you would go online, take a look at your entry. There are people who still have old call signs up there, or maybe their call signs not there because they joined before the, that's my watch telling me football is starting right now. Anyway, there are people who signed up to be members of the club before they got their calls, and so we don't know your call. Email address, oh my gosh, yes. Email addresses, physical addresses, phone numbers. Go online, take a look. You know, it's our information is only as good as what you provide us. All right, do we have any other business? Any other business? Yes, sir. It's a password. Stand by. Stand by.
That's something you should blast. You shouldn't put that on YouTube.
Yep.
No.
You're right. Okay. See one of these guys. Yep. Okay. Anybody else? Any further business? Going once, going twice, go home, watch football, have a good day. And we'll see you at the next club meeting.
Boomer Sooner.
Denny says there's some equipment up here.
Boomer Sooner.
It's a 200 or a 200. It's a 20 megahertz. My goodness, where'd my brain go? No, it's an oscilloscope. 200 mega or 20 megahertz oscilloscope. You cannot beat the price. Free, take it home.
Okay, for those of you who didn't hear, there's an oscilloscope up here. If you're interested in it, see Denny. All right, y'all go home.